why Christianity hadn't worked. His answer: Christianity hasn't failed, it just hasn't been tried. Restorative justice hasn't failed, and in too many cases it just hasn't been tried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. Next up is Eugene Ryder, who is a community worker with the Wesley Community Action Group. He's also a patched member of the Wellington Black Power. Welcome.
Kia ora all. Just for those that don't understand Māori, forgive me for what I'm about to say, but I will translate once I finish saying it. So tuatahi me mihi au ki te whare tū mai nei, e whare mahana tēnei, tuarua e mihi au ki a tātou nei kaihanga kei runga rawa. Moi ai tātou, nāna nā mea timata, me nā me mutunga. Me mihi ki ngā mate o ngā marae maha. Me rātou maa tātou whānau, kei roto te waka a Māori kei o tautahi, me mihi mahana ki a rātou, hei wehe atu, hei ngaro atu, me mihi. Ka huri au te reo, hei mohi o te runi o tātou. I just wanted to start today by thanking our Creator for our whare here, our whare mahalo, our warm house, and secondly, thank our Creator, of course, for creating us. And as we know, He's what starts things and He's what ends things. And according to one of my colleagues, she's what starts things and she's what ends things. Also made reference to those of our whānau that have passed on, and especially to those in Christchurch that are struggling with the challenges that they're facing today. My name is Eugene Ryder, as you know. I am a patch member of Wellington Black Power. I have been for 24 years. Am I a Christian? No. That can be challenging at times, especially when you are in a room full of Christians. But I'm up for the challenge. I was born and bred in West Auckland. Please don't hold that against me. My father was a minister of the Ratana Church. He preached to our family every day. My father had 38 children to 7 wives. I was one of 8 of his last wife. He instilled in us that because he was a minister, he was going to heaven. And because we were sinners, we weren't. What I saw in my upbringing, in terms of what my father was doing to my sisters, I didn't want to be in the same place where that fellow was. And that kind of created my journey in terms of religion or non-religion in my life. I've since met many people that don't have the same background as my father did, and didn't go through the actions that he did when we were growing up. One of my early experiences in terms of Christianity again was in a place called Horrible Farm in Pusarugu, which was run by the Salvation Army at the time. I was a bit confused because I would get the cane on a weekly basis there because I was a sinner. And once again, I didn't want to be in the same place that these people were. And that kind of discouraged me from following the Salvation Army track. Similar to the previous speaker, I found a group of people that supported me through thick and thin. That group of people were the Wellington Black Power. At the age of 16, I had no money, and I found a place that did. It was a bank, and I tried to change that. It was one of the biggest opportunities to learn how to do things differently. I got caught, I went to jail, I was sentenced for 4 years, 9 months. I went to jail when I was 16, I got out a month before I turned 20. I spent what I would consider the prime of my life trying to be a man, trying to grow up. When I went into prison, my whakaaro or my thought process was that if you weren't a black power, you were an idiot. And when I got to prison, I met these 2 guys who weren't idiots, who were in the mumble mob. And that challenged my thinking. I met 2 idiots who were in the black power. And that really challenged my thinking. And I had to open up my mind, and I started seeing people as people. While I was in prison, my father, his past caught up with him. He ended up serving 8 years in Paremore. He died in his cell. I was in my cell when he died. my brother was in his cell in Mount Eden, my sister was in her cell in Arohata, and one of my other sisters was in her cell in Paparua. It created what is known as an epiphany for me. I didn't like what I was going through. I didn't like that I wasn't going to be able to attend my father's tangi. I didn't like that I was sitting in a cell. I didn't like that my father was sitting in a cell. And I started a journey to try to stop that from happening. I was allowed out through the efforts of one of our lifetime patch members, who at one stage in his life did training to become a Catholic priest, Father Dennis O'Reilly. And he got me out of prison for 24 hours. And I was in Tūrangi, and I had to get to Kaitaia and back. And along the way, mourned the loss of my father and buried him. I'd only seen Dennis on TV. He was a patch member of my chapter, and I'd never met him in person. And he showed up one day and got me out. And he helped me realise that people are more important than anything else. And I've worked with Dennis since the day I got out. Do I walk a Christian walk? I'm not sure how Christians walk. I'm sure I do. Do I talk a Christian talk? No, I don't. I have a mentor, William Mong, who is Burmese, and he is a practicing Buddhist. He said to me one day, we were talking about Christianity, and I said, do you believe in God? And he said, no, I don't. My faith leads me in a different direction. And he says, but just in case there is one, what I do on earth, I hope, will help me get into heaven. And that kind of, for me, made me think, man, you know, if there is a God, he's watching me all the time, according to the book. And so I needed to change my ways, not only my actions, but my thoughts and my talk, in order to, just in case, get into heaven. I've read the Bible twice, and I still struggle to understand it. The Old Testament was the hardest, but I was familiar with the whakapapa, with the way it was set out. And it is a struggle. Recently, in the 6 years ago, I think, a meeting was held between Black Power leadership and Mungo Mob leadership in Hastings. And a guy came over from the States that was going to inspire us to do things differently. And we went to this meeting with not much expectations of getting stuff out of it. And so the question was asked of us all, what did we want for our children? And so a guy from the Mungo Mob stepped up and talked about what his aspirations were for his children. And we from the Black Power freaked out because he was saying what we wanted to say. And we were suspicious that he was bugging our phones. But what we realised was that we all had the same aspirations. We want for our children probably what you want for your children. What's unfortunate in terms of our community is that our way of life has been somewhat instilled in us. And my brothers, they say to me, bro, can you help my son? He's getting in trouble, he's drinking, he's fighting, he's getting arrested. And I say to my bro, I wonder who's modelling that for him, bro. You know, why is he doing that? And as much work as we do with our rangatahi, with our young people, work has to be done with the environment that they go back to. Otherwise, it's almost worthless. So the changing of the role modelling, you know, has to be important. A lot of our bros think they don't change, and they're never going to. But a common thread among us all is the welfare of our children. There's one or two of our bros that don't have children, therefore don't care. And that's a challenge for myself and my mate. I've worked for Wesley Community Action now for 4 years. I thought it ironic that I ended up within a church environment. Wesley Community Action is affiliated with Methodist Mission Aotearoa, MMA. And all my upbringing, I thought MMA stood for Mungo Mob Auckland. And I'm still challenged with those today I have friends in the Mungo Mob. I've worked closely with Roy Dunn and Edge the and Bones. And 4 years ago I got a call from Edge, And he says to me, bro, we're doing this horse trick up in Tūrangi. Any of your bros want to come up? And I thought, man, are we getting set up here? I grabbed 4 of our tamatoa, or what used to be known as prospects, and I took them up to Tūrangi. And we got there and I explained to them on our way up there that they were going to be among about 15 mango mob. They were challenged by that. I wasn't going to turn around, and I told them that, I'm a phone call away if they thought they couldn't handle it. A lot of our young fellas have this bravado that they have to handle it, and if they can't handle it, they're seen as weak. So none of them wanted to pull out of this thing. When I got up there, Ed said to me, oh, bro, you coming horse trekking with us? I was like, oh, nah, bro, I'm a city boy, with a car and stuff, I don't ride horses. And so I dropped my bros off there and left them there. And 5 days later, I came back. And what I saw was, 2 distinct groups of people going into the bush on horse. When I got there 5 days later, 2 distinct people came out of the bush as well. What I noticed was that these young fellas were calling each other bro. 5 days earlier, they were calling each other enemies. And I saw something there, something happened in there that needed to be progressed. So Ed said to me, next year, bro, can you organise something for us? And one of my interests is diving. And so we organised a dive course for participants. And we had 4 rangatahi from the Mango Mob and 4 rangatahi from the Black Power. And we stayed over on Machu Island, or Soames Island, in Wellington here for 6 days. And we had no expectations, we had no goals, we just wanted to see what would happen. We wanted to create a space where we have interaction with the Mango Mob that doesn't end in violence or arrest. And it was a test, it was a high risk thing that we did, and it was risky at the time. There were times where the bros would come and see me and say, we've got to do something about that guy's attitude or about what that guy said. And that was challenging for both Ed and I. At the end of it, we had 8 guys that were qualified in scuba diving. It was, for some of them, their first, it was their first qualification. It was the first piece of paper that they got. And that was an eye-opener for us and for them. So the following year, last year, we went to Kaikoura, to a place called Ariama down there. And we did the same, and we engaged with a couple of our members of our respective communities from the South Island. Down in Dunedin, there was some kind of a war going on between our communities. And so we asked one of the leaders and one of the young fellows from both of those communities to come up and join us. And it was awe-inspiring. It was unreal. For the first time, I took my children with me down there. And I was challenged by my bros here in Wellington about why am I putting my children at risk? Why am I taking them down there in an environment with the perceived enemy? I didn't see the Mango Mob as the enemy at that time. And on the last day of our kaupapa down there, I got up and talked about the reasoning why my children were there. That there were now 6 Mango Mob that I knew my kids were safe with. Prior to that day, I didn't know that. And there were 2 of the Mango Mob kids there that they knew were safe with me. And we're still challenged within our own communities about what it is we're doing. And I think one of our struggles is some of the attitudes of some of our people. The same attitude that I had before I went to jail. That if you're not one of us, you're the enemy, you're an idiot. And it is difficult to get through, but deep down inside, everyone knows what's right and what's wrong. And they make the decision to do whatever they want. When I heard about coming to speak up here, one of the things I was encouraged to talk about was how to reach hard to reach communities. Believe it or not, according to our community, yous are the hard to reach community. There was a time where I kind of thought I needed to wear rubber-soled shoes when I was walking into a church in case I was struck by lightning. And now I work at the Wesley Parish, and that's opened the door, at least for our bros in Wellington, to consider where I work a safe place, something that they never considered prior to us working there. People ask me, how do we get to these communities that we don't get to? And I say to them, well, it's not kind of, if you're working with a group of golfers, don't get a netball player. If you're working with some rugby players, don't get a soccer player. If you're working with the black power, don't get the mob. If you're working with the mob, don't get the black power. So you kind of basically, if you want to reach into the communities that you don't have that much in common with, get one of them. Leadership exists in every community. And leadership in our community doesn't necessarily mean president. Leadership exists in our community, within our kids, within our wahine, and obviously within our men. It's a difficult process when you're tarred with the same brushes. When things go bad, when things hit the front page, we're all thugs, we're all rapists and we're all murderers. And that's a struggle when actually some of us aren't. It's difficult when the government sees things such as funding initiatives that gang members are part of as gangs funding, government funding gang activities. And that's what they put out there. So we do get into a bit of strife now and then, and the organisation I work for has come under the hammer at times because of my employment with them. But they back us up. They're good people. For those of you that don't know Wesley, get to know them. They're the first organisation that I've worked with that are open to learning. We have the wife of the leader of the Korerua Mangu mob as one of our members, one of our managers. They employed me, a Black Power member, and that we've just employed one of our wahine from our Black Power community to work with the wahine. The struggles are never going to stop. When we see the amount of beds that have been opened up in the prisons, we're clear on who's going to be filling those beds. We know that it's our community that's going to be there. They've created laws nowadays that make us criminals by association. A case was heard in Hastings District Court about 3 years ago, where 24 of our members were arrested on Christmas Eve for being part of a criminal organisation when a shooting happened at the courthouse. In March, at their trial, they were all found not guilty, and they were released. And the lawyers in this particular case said, yes, we won. And the prosecutors in the same case said, yes, we won. And we were a bit confused about that. And we wondered, how could the prosecution win? We got off this case. What we realised was that they had taken 24 members of our community off the street, away from their families, in the prison for the Christmas period in that area. And that was a challenge for us. We started realising that we need to be careful. Under the current, and this law is under the Terrorist Act. And when we saw what was going down in Tūhoe and around the country with all those raids were happening, we were surprised that it wasn't happening to us. We had talked about it with Moana Jackson 12 months earlier, and we had expected that that was going to happen to us first. When we saw the uproar that General New Zealand had about those arrests, it made us think that if today they did that same thing to us and the Mangu mob, everyone would think, yeah, right, that's who you've got to be hitting, not the Tūhoe people, not them. And that scares us. One of the ways a government has defined a gang associate is a prospect, a spouse, or a blood relative. So my 4-year-old son is a gang associate under their law. And under that same law can be held and detained without reason for as long as they want. Now, we don't think they're going to do that. The fact that they can do that scares us. We think about what we want to do for our children, where they're going to be. When we see the amount of schools that are closing down versus the amount of prisons that are being built, it scares us. It really scares us. I met recently with a couple of years ago with a guy who was head of Police Association. What's his name? O'Connor. And he said to me, he says, Eugene, we have to smash the gangs. I said, we have to smash the gangs? Why do we have to do that, right? Because they're recruiting at the schools now. And what gives you that idea? And he said, well, gang members have been seen at the school prior to and after school. I said, did you stop to think they got kids there? He goes, no, they're there to recruit. And I said, well, I drop my kids off at school and I go and pick them up after school. If I don't, you say I'm neglecting their education. How can we win? What I find difficult is, like, I left school when I was made a state ward. I was made a state ward when I was 12. I didn't think school was all that. And to be honest, I still don't. Yet I'm encouraging my kids to go into a place that I think failed me. And that's difficult for me. When my daughter says to me when she's in fifth form and she's not doing so well in English, I said, babe, what's going on? She says, oh, Papa, English is boring. And I had to agree with her. It is. I still don't know the difference between a verb and an adverb. And so it's difficult, and yet I still try to encourage you to get in there and do what you can. There are a lot of our members, our brothers, our sisters that don't encourage their kids to go to school. They actually discourage them, and that's understandable, yet not condonable. I'm a firm believer of the saying, idle hands are the devil's playground. I'm a firm believer in that, because when I had nothing to do, it's usually when I robbed the bank or something. And it was when I had nothing to do that I got into trouble. So what I try and do in my work is give people things to do. Things that are constructive, things that they are going to follow through with. We had a young guy who was right into stealing cars, car conversion. He thought he was the youngest car converter in Wellington and was proud of that. So I kind of pulled him aside and says, we're going to work with you, bro. And he goes, oh, what are you going to do? And I said, well, we'll start with getting you a car. And he freaked out. He goes, give me a car? I said, well, then you'll stop stealing cars, bro. And then we got him into a driver's licensing course. And he got his license. And that guy hasn't stolen the car since. Ironically, his car got stolen. And he finally understood the views of his victims. Yeah. And it changed him. It changed him. We got another guy that for umpteen times kept getting arrested for drunk driving. And on his, I think his 6th appearance, he was disqualified for life. And he wasn't allowed to get his license back until after 3 years, and he had done an AA course and he had done all this stuff that he wasn't that prepared to do. And I said to him after his court case, I said, geez, that's a long time, eh, bro? He goes, yep, I'm going to give it up. Far out, bro, good on you. Start with AA. He goes, oh, no, I'm going to give up driving. And I was like, no. And he's never gone back for drunk driving. Fella still drinks, but he's not in the eyes of the law. Lesser of the evil, maybe. Some of our guys are not governed by the law of the land. They're governed by their own set of morals, which admittedly sometimes aren't that high. But they do have faith, they do have courage, and they do have traits that we try to instill in our own children. I was at a conference recently where we talked about what a successful parent is. And I talked about how traditionally and historically the success of a father was that his son takes over his business and kind of someone named Sons and all that kind of stuff. And so I said, if you think along those lines and my son becomes a patch member of the Wellington Black Belt, am I a successful parent? And I kind of thought about that and I thought, no, you're not. You know, and people ask me, do you want your son to join the Black Belt? And it's challenging for some to hear, but my son is in the Black Belt. He is the Black Belt. We have created what we call a whakapapa, so that all our children are Black Belt. We did a workshop with Moana Jackson recently where we looked at the creation of what's known as the tribe or iwi, and the creation of Black Power. And we didn't see too much difference in that. So at the drop of a hat, we called ourselves an iwi. And we said, okay, Black Power from this day forward is an iwi. And we made a claim to the Waitangi Tribunal, and everyone freaked out, and it was crazy. At the same hui, one of our wahine got up who was more traditional in her thought processes. And she got up and she says, before you do this, bros, you need to go back to your whānau, you need to go back to your marae, to your elders, and let them know what we're doing. And one of our bros got up, and he was the President of Auckland, still is. And he said, you want me to go back to those people that raped me and my sister when we were growing up? And she freaked out. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, they're the reason I am the black power. I cut my ties with that lot. Then another bro got up and said exactly the same thing. And we realised that we were all in the same boat. You know, I gravitated towards the black power because I saw me in there. Everyone that was in there was a state war. Everyone that was in there had some kind of abuse. Now other people have dealt with it in more progressive ways, dealt with their past, dealt with the struggles that they've had. The way we dealt with it was coming together and forming support from each other. In 1976, I was recently watching this video of was one of the conventions, Black Power conventions in Wellington. And they had a guy, Ray Harris, who used to be the national president of Black Power. And he was saying to the bros that there's this thing called a block. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, it was basically a gang rape of a woman. And so Ray Harris is sitting there saying, okay guys, you know, when we do these blocks, we're not allowed to hit the woman. If she struggles, just hold her down, but don't hit her. And when I was watching this video, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what was happening in the minds of those bros back then? Why were they disrespecting this woman? And that created, as I learned, the formation of the nomads, who used to be the Black Power nomads. And when they heard that direction from Ray Harris, they didn't want anything to do with it. They said that the reason they joined the Black Power was so that they could do that stuff. And that freaked me out. We've come a long way since then. We've come such a long way that not only do we frown upon family violence within our brotherhood, but we almost ostracize them. Almost. We've put out a corridor with our wahine. And if they're in a situation where they fear for their safety and they think something domestic is going to happen, then ring me before you ring the police. And at times I've had to ring the police on their behalf. At times I haven't. And basically I just try and organise it so that the bro doesn't go to jail, the wahine doesn't get hit, the kids are safe. And that's something that, you know, when the likes of government agencies look at that work, they say, oh, you're covering up for what's really happening. You know, and for me, you know, our reality is our reality. The way we choose to address it is either good or bad. And I need to admit, a minority within my community. Not all of us think this way. 10 years ago, there were 5 of us. Today, there's 100 of us. We're taking small steps. My kaumata said to me once, boy, why don't you just get along? Yeah, you're all related, you're in the mob. And I know that because my brother's in the mob in Auckland. And I said, well, Auntie, when are we going to get along with Waikato? She said, what Waikato? When are we going to get along with them? I said, well, we've been at that for thousands of years, you know. We've been at this for 40 years, or really we're at the table. We've got what we call a table that exists within the leadership of the mob and the Black Power. And now we've brought on the tribesmen, the highways, and at times the Hells Angels. From the day one of our babies got shot and killed in Waikanae, we put together a team that we call a firefighting team. And so when we see smoke, we go there and try and put it out before it becomes a fire. Basically, when shit goes down, we try and get the right people there to sort that out so that it doesn't end up on the front page. None of the work that we do ends up on the front page. Only when we fail, that ends up on the front page. It's difficult when we have what seems like the world against us. It's encouraging to have the likes of Kim and others, Sam, that are there to support us through thick and thin. They're the same people, you know, they're the reason I joined the Black Power. If I'd have met these guys, I may have joined the prison fellowship. I did join the prison.
You're still there. You're showing up well, bro.
You know, I went to church every Sunday in prison. The reason I went to church every Sunday in prison is because it wasn't in myself. You know, I wanted to get out of there. Second reason, because they always bought biscuits. And as I understand, they still do. But you know, I've had calls from my bros saying, there's not enough blacks in here, bro. And I'm like, bring us the good news, what's the bad news? And he's like, nah, we've got to get some more bros in there. There's too many of our bros are getting hit. We had this kind of way of thinking that we're responsible for our brothers until they go to jail. And up to, once they're in jail, they're responsible for themselves. And now that's changed. One of the challenges is we're not allowed in the prisons unless we've committed a crime. It's good to be not allowed in prison, but it's hard when we're trying to help our brothers that are in there. So I'm not sure.
You're stealing my time, brother.
So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Kim for inviting me here, to thank you all for your ears, for listening, and please, if I've offended any of you, tell me. No, don't tell me. Thank you very much.